So whenever you do what the Word of God says and you begin to grow, you realize that along the way you got to make choices. And these choices that you make, you know, when you miss the lesson, if you miss the lesson that first time, that second time, that third, fourth time, some of you have been around that mountain 20, 40 times. And when you miss the lesson, you finally realize at some point that it takes self-discipline, the fruit of the Spirit. It takes self-discipline and control. It takes the fruit of the Spirit. You're not going to get past that. You can hang it up if you're trying to, because you're just not. You miss the lesson of kingdom responsibility. Now, why am I talking about responsibility? Because these lessons, these last few weeks, have been all on y'all, whether you chose to do them or you didn't choose to do them, whether you chose to do the exercises or you chose not to do the exercises. The first week of Kiva Boot Camp, I had lots of complaining and murmuring. It reminded me of the children of Israel, how even when God delivered them, they continued to complain. Oh, the man ain't good enough. We need meat. You know, we love to complain. And that's something that God does not love for us to do. He does not like for us to complain. The first week of boot camp, though, I had lots of people who did not agree with the exercise routine. And I'm talking about y'all. When I tell you they was in the inbox, and some of you may be listening, some of you may not be listening, but they was in my inbox, and they was like, oh, I just can't do this. I just can't do that. You know, if they would have only took time to read the instructions well, instead of just being desperate to be in something and do something, then they would have known that I said modify. See, that's what happens when we want a right now answer. When we want to be in something really bad that we don't take time to read the fine print. That lets me know that they have an issue with adapting to crisis situations and also responsibilities. It lets me know also that they have an issue inside their heart. That when it comes down to being responsible, some of them would rather blame what they have seen versus speak up and tell you the truth. Now, they could have told the truth and said, well, okay, I'm going to do the written portion of it, but I'm not going to do the exercise portion of it. That would have been a better answer versus complaining. You know why? Because that would have been direct responsibility and accountability. They would have been accountable for their answer, and they would have been responsible for what they do. And would I have been mad about it? No, we're not children. As I said, you get what you can get. What you put in it is what you're going to get out of it, too. You know, so if you put your heart half in it, you're going to get a half a job. You reap what you sow. That's Bible, period. So the instructions clearly said if you can't do it, modify. Instead of murmuring and complaining, they could have easily found a hand exercise. Remember what I keep telling y'all. This is about breaking your patterns, breaking your negative behavior patterns, your negative way of thinking patterns. If they couldn't have done the exercise, another alternative would have been, even if it won't but for 2 or 3 minutes, if they didn't do nothing but move their one little finger. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's serious. It's crazy how we don't try to do something because our mind keeps telling us that we can't. But if they would have just moved one little finger for 2 minutes, that was it would have made a difference in their day, and it would have been a difference in their routine. It would have been considered doing something different. And like I said, we cannot put God in the box in this season. He has done too much for us, and we owe it all to him. All the praises and glory go to him. If you had one little finger or you just had one hand that you could wave for 2 minutes, do you know the victory that is in that? So don't ever say what you can't do. Don't limit yourself. That was a mindset crisis right there. Don't put yourself in limitation. Waving your hand takes more than you think. If you try it for, okay, y'all, let's do it for, I'm going to say, let's do it for 20 seconds, okay? And I'm going to count it down, and I want you to feel what it feels like to wave your hand for 20 seconds. I know some of you church folk, you might be a pro at this, but let's see. Okay, y'all ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Now, who couldn't do that? Who can come up with something different? You see, we take for granted the ability that God has given us in our body, in our limbs. We take for granted the activity of our limbs. We complain about the things that don't work on us. When God has said, I have given you plenty of things that do work on you. So what I'm saying is you got to take personal responsibility for how you receive and perceive things in this season. And some of you aren't growing because you don't want that personal responsibility. So you look at me and say, well, I can't do that. Well, I know God has given you a hand. God has given you a finger. There is something that you can do to be thankful and grateful. That's why I said modify. You could have prayed on it. You could have prayed and said, Lord, I don't feel like I'm able to do any jogging or walking right now, but is there something else that I can do that will take the place of this? Is there a different thing that I can do in this season that will help me grow? The focus is growth, okay? It's growth, growing from your old ways. The only way you're going to get out of your old ways is to shed those layers of that stinking onion so that you can get fresh layers. So you can get the fresh glory of God upon your life. So you got to learn how to shed some things. You got to be willing to let go and let God. You got to be willing to speak your mind down. You know, it's a battle. It's a battle. That's why we got to put on the full armor of God, because this is a battle that we are in. And until we start learning to trust God with this battle that we're in mentally and physically, we're going to keep seeing the same results over and over. And you're going to keep playing that same song over and over. So part of growing up, personal responsibility is one of the most valuable lessons that you can take from this class. If you don't take nothing else, take that the Lord is with you, and personal responsibility is part of your growth. You know, part of growing up is being responsible for yourself. It's a blessing when you can be responsible for yourself. So many times I think how I took for granted, you know, I had a voice and didn't use it. I took that for granted so many times. And so in this season, God wants you to use your voice. He wants you to be responsible for yourself. He wants you to be responsible for your emotions, your responses, your reactions, and how you deal with people who mistreat you and how they deal with you. This is your responsibility. You have a responsibility to take care of you as well. Okay, so the vocabulary word for tonight, and it's coming from Site Central. And those of you may be listening during the daytime as well. I am not forgetting about you. But the vocabulary word is, what is personal responsibility? And I think a lot of times if people just only understood what this really meant, then they would do better. Personal responsibility is an individual. It's not we. It's not us. It's just I. It's an individual responsible for their actions, beliefs, and their intentions and feelings. Personal responsibility puts the actions back in place to each individual. You hear me? Each individual. That means if I know that you are doing me wrong, and I sit there and I keep taking it when God has made a way of escape for me. Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that really? That person that's doing you wrong, they being themselves. You know they mean. You know they nasty. You know they don't care nothing about you. But you continue to stay there when you have a choice. You know, sometimes there are some situations, I want to make this clear, that there are some situations where women get into domestic violence situations and they have children, and sometimes they say, well, I stayed for the kids. I stayed for the kids so that they would have a roof over their head. I stayed for the kids so that they would eat, could have something to eat. And, you know, and a lot of times, I'm going to tell you, that person who stayed for the kids actually did more damage to those children than if they would have left and became homeless and let God put them in a place. A lot of children and a lot of adults right now are damaged because their mother and father was prideful and stayed in those domestic violence situations, talking about, I'm staying for the kids. Did not think that any damage would be done as long as the kids ain't hit physically. You know, there's no harm, right? But that's wrong. Verbal actions and vocals are just as damaging as seeing someone physically hit or being physically hit. Verbal abuse can take a person down, especially children. And so we have to be careful how we get out here and don't take responsibility for our actions. How we say, well, it's because of them that I believe this way. Well, if you know that your belief system is a little wrong, or you know that it's causing problems in your life, then it's up to you to go and get it changed. It's up to you to learn and grow in order to fix it. If you know that a person's intentions are ill toward you and you continue to stick in that situation, it's up to you to make up your mind. You do have a choice. Don't ever feel like you don't have a choice. Even if it means that you're going to be a little homeless for a while or you may have to go to the shelter, don't ever feel like you don't have a choice. God has birthed some beautiful people out of these shelters, and He has healed and restored so many people that have been in that same situation who took that leap of faith and said, enough is enough. Enough is enough. I'm done. I got to grow up out of this. And when they grow up, when they mature up, when they allow God to mature them in the spirit, they get up and leave. And God always has a resource or somebody out there that can provide help. He said He will provide a way of escape. That's what He said. Okay, so when we go to Ezekiel 18:20, it's in the Old Testament, and Ezekiel talks about basically, are children punished for the sins of their parents? Each one of us are responsible for our feelings, emotions, how we think, our actions and behaviors, even when it comes to our relationships and beliefs. You know, the wicked is responsible for their wicked actions, and they will be treated as such by God. And the righteous are responsible for their actions, their righteous actions, and they will be rewarded as such for their actions. So when it comes down to who is going to die in this sin out here, this thing called the world, this thing out here called trending and all that stuff, when it comes down to it, each individual is going to be held according to their own works, according to their own deeds, what you did and what you did not do. And, you know, sometimes I think about the women who stayed in those relationships and didn't realize that they had freedom. Freedom was there all along. They just didn't have the voice to take or the faith to take those steps. Because sometimes women are so damaged from their childhood, they think this is all I have. This is all I'm worth. Well, I want to let y'all know that you're worth a whole lot more to God